Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. Growing up in the suburbs as the son of immigrants, I always felt like an outsider looking in. My parents moved to this country in the 1980s with nothing but determination and a dream. They worked tirelessly, my father driving taxis for 18 hours a day while my mother cleaned houses and offices at night. Despite their hard work and eventual success with a small grocery store, there were always places in our town where we knew we weren't welcome. One of those places was the prestigious country club that sat on the hill overlooking our neighborhood. As a kid, I would ride my bike past its imposing gates and manicured lawns, watching the members play tennis or golf. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of poolside parties through the fence. My father once inquired about membership when his business began doing well. He was told there was a waiting list and given an application that was never acknowledged. Years later, we learned from a sympathetic employee that applications from people with ethnic-sounding names were simply filed away. That memory stayed with me as I grew up and built my own success. After college, I went into real estate, starting small with a single fixer-upper and gradually expanding. 20 years later, I had a thriving investment company with properties across 3 states. I never flaunted my wealth or success. I lived comfortably, but modestly. My parents had taught me that true respect wasn't about showing off, but about integrity and how you treated others. Last year, I learned through industry contacts that the ownership group behind that same country club was quietly looking to sell. The property had become less profitable as newer clubs with more modern facilities opened nearby. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I had just sold several commercial properties and was looking for a new investment. Within weeks, I had created a new LLC and made an offer through my attorneys. After some negotiation, we closed the deal. Interestingly, the sale agreement included a clause that the ownership change would remain confidential for 6 months to allow for a smooth transition. This suited me perfectly. I wanted to experience the club as a regular member before making any changes. I applied for membership under my own name, paid the exorbitant fees, and was accepted. I suspected my membership approval came easier now than it would have 20 years ago because I was known as a successful businessman, though the subtle looks of surprise when I showed up in person for the first time spoke volumes. For 3 months, I observed, the club was beautiful, with an 18-hole golf course, tennis courts, a spa, and an Olympic-sized pool with a separate children's area. The staff was professional, though I noticed how differently they treated members depending on their appearance or perceived status. I documented everything quietly, taking notes on my phone after each visit. The manager, a man I'll call Tom, seemed to run the place with military precision. He was in his mid-50s, always impeccably dressed, with a forced smile that never reached his eyes. I watched how he fawned over certain members while barely acknowledging others. The incident that changed everything happened on a Saturday in July. My sister and her 2 teenage kids were visiting from out of state. I had checked the guest policy thoroughly and knew I could bring up to 4 guests at a time, paying the appropriate guest fees. We arrived around noon, I signed them in at the front desk, paid the fees, and we headed to the pool area. We had been there maybe an hour, my niece and nephew enjoying the water while my sister and I caught up on family news, when I noticed Tom watching us from across the pool deck. He spoke to one of the attendants, who glanced our way with a concerned expression. A few minutes later, Tom approached our table. "Good afternoon," he said, not bothering to introduce himself. "Are these people with you?" "Yes, this is my sister and her children. I signed them in as guests and paid the fees." He looked at them with barely disguised disdain. "There seems to be some confusion. Our weekend guest policy has recently changed. Family guests are limited to immediate family only." I knew this was false. I had just reviewed the membership handbook the previous night. "That's interesting. I just checked the policy yesterday, and it specifically states members can bring up to 4 guests with additional fees for non-immediate family. I paid those fees at reception." Tom's smile tightened. "Perhaps you misunderstood. The policy is quite clear to our regular members." The emphasis on regular wasn't subtle. My sister shot me a concerned look. "Could you show me where this policy is written?" I asked calmly. "Look." Tom lowered his voice, leaning in slightly. "Several members have mentioned they're uncomfortable with the, atmosphere today. We try to maintain certain standards here. I'm sure you understand." The pool area was half empty. The only thing different about the atmosphere was us. "What exactly about the atmosphere is problematic?" I asked, maintaining my composure. He glanced at my sister's hijab, then back to me. "This is a family establishment. We need to ensure all our members feel comfortable." "We are a family," I replied, "and we're not doing anything to make anyone uncomfortable." "Nevertheless," he said, his voice hardening, "I'm going to have to ask your guests to leave. You're welcome to stay, of course." My niece and nephew had gotten out of the pool and were standing nearby, dripping wet and looking confused. My nephew, only 13, asked, "Uncle, what's wrong? Did we do something bad?" Before I could answer, Tom interjected, "Nothing's wrong, son. We just have certain rules here about who can use the facilities." The condescension in his tone made my blood boil, but I remained outwardly calm. "Tom, I'd like to speak with you privately about this. There's nothing to discuss. People like you always think you can find loopholes in the rules, but I have a responsibility to our membership." People like me? You know what I mean. Members who haven't been part of the club culture long enough to understand our traditions. I looked around and noticed several people watching the interaction. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed almost satisfied by what was happening. One elderly server behind the bar caught my eye. She quickly looked away, but not before I saw the apology in her expression. "I'll tell you what," I said finally. "We'll leave now to avoid creating a scene, but I'd like to meet with you on Monday to review the membership policies together." "That won't be necessary. In fact, I'll be reviewing your membership status. We have a behavioral clause that gives management discretion in these matters." My sister touched my arm. "Let's just go. The kids are uncomfortable." I nodded, gathering our things while Tom stood watching, arms crossed. As we left, he followed a few steps behind, as if making sure we actually exited. I could feel my nephew's confusion and my niece's humiliation. It was a feeling I knew too well from my own childhood. In the parking lot, my sister tried to comfort the kids. "I'm so sorry," I told them. "That should never have happened." "Why didn't you tell him off?" my nephew asked. "You always taught us to stand up to bullies." "Sometimes," I explained, "the smartest way to fight is to choose the right battlefield. Today wasn't it, but Monday will be different." I didn't tell them about my ownership of the property. I wanted to handle this properly, with evidence and witnesses. That evening, I called my attorney and explained what happened. We agreed to meet at the club on Monday morning. When Monday came, I arrived at the club around 10 a.m. with my attorney waiting in her car nearby. As expected, my membership card was declined at the entrance. The young receptionist looked mortified. "I'm sorry, sir. Your membership has been flagged. Let me call the manager." Tom appeared moments later, looking smug. "I was expecting you might try to return. As I mentioned on Saturday, your membership has been revoked due to violation of club policies and creating a disturbance." "What specific policies did I violate?" "Section 12 of the membership agreement gives management discretion regarding behavior detrimental to club atmosphere. Your confrontational attitude on Saturday qualified." "I'd like a copy of that section, please." "This is private property, and you're trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." I stood my ground. "I'd like to see that policy first." Tom's face reddened. "Security!" he called to a young man standing nearby. "Please escort this person off the premises. If he refuses to leave, call the police." The security guard, barely out of his 20s, approached reluctantly. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." "It's fine," I said. "I'll wait outside for the police." Tom looked triumphant. "That won't be necessary. Just leave and don't come back." "No, I insist. Call the police. I'd like to formally document what's happening here." My calmness clearly unnerved him. He probably expected me to create a scene that would further justify his actions. Instead, I waited patiently while he made the call, describing me as a belligerent ex-member refusing to leave private property. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. By this time, several staff members had gathered to watch, along with a few curious early morning golfers. "What seems to be the problem here?" asked the older officer. Tom stepped forward. "This man's membership was revoked for policy violations, and he's refusing to leave the premises." The officer turned to me. "Sir, is this correct?" "Partially," I replied. "My membership was revoked without cause after I brought family members here as guests on Saturday. When I came today to discuss the matter, I was immediately told to leave. I requested to see the policy I allegedly violated, but Mr. Tom here called you instead." "It's private property," Tom interjected. "We don't need a reason." The officer nodded. "That's technically correct, sir. If they want you to leave, you need to comply." "I understand," I said. "Before I go, I'd like to clarify one thing." I took out my phone and pulled up a document. "Officer, would you mind confirming who owns this property?" The officer looked confused but took my phone. His expression changed as he read the document. "This says the property is owned by Greenhill Investments, LLC." "That's right," I replied. "And as the sole owner of Greenhill Investments, LLC, I'm actually the owner of this entire property, including the land, buildings, and business." The silence that followed was deafening. Tom's face drained of color. "That's impossible. The ownership group is based in New York." I turned to him. Greenhill purchased the property 6 months ago. The previous owners requested confidentiality during the transition period, which ends next week. I've been observing the operations as a regular member to understand the club culture before implementing changes. The officer handed back my phone. Seems like there's been a misunderstanding here. This is a private matter between management and ownership. I nodded. Yes, it is, and I'll take it from here. I waved to my attorney, who had been watching from her car. She approached with a briefcase. This is my attorney, I explained to everyone present. She'll be assisting me today as I review the club's employment contracts and policies. Tom was sputtering now. There must be some mistake. I report directly to the board. The board reports to me now, I replied. But this isn't just about ownership. This is about a pattern of discriminatory practices that I've observed and documented over the past 3 months. My attorney opened her briefcase and handed me a folder. I have records of at least 7 incidents where members or guests of Middle Eastern, South Asian, or African American descent were treated differently than white members. I have statements from 5 staff members who were instructed to apply policies differently based on members' ethnicity or religion. Tom's smugness had completely evaporated. That's absurd! We treat everyone equally here. Including when you told me people like you always look for loopholes, or when you mentioned that my family was making other members uncomfortable despite us doing nothing but sitting quietly by the pool? Several staff members were looking at the floor now. One older waitress stepped forward. It's true. I've worked here for 15 years and there's always been different rules for different people. Tom glared at her. Lisa, get back to work! I turned to the security guard. Would you please escort Mr. Tom to his office to collect his personal belongings? His employment is terminated, effective immediately. The young guard looked at Tom, then at me, then back at Tom. He made his choice. Sir, please come with me. Tom was nearly shouting now. You can't do this! I have a contract! I've managed this club for 12 years! Your contract, my attorney interjected, has a moral conduct clause and a non-discrimination requirement. We have more than enough evidence to justify termination with cause. As Tom was led away, still protesting, I addressed the remaining staff. I apologize for the dramatic start to the day. There will be an all-staff meeting at 3 p.m. to discuss the future of the club. Until then, please continue with your regular duties. No one else's job is in jeopardy today. The next few weeks were busy. I called an emergency board meeting where most members were shocked to learn about the ownership change. A few tried to argue against my plans for the club, but when presented with the documentation of discriminatory practices and the potential legal liabilities, they quickly fell in line. Those who couldn't accept the new direction were invited to resign, which 3 did. We implemented new policies that maintained the club's high standards while eliminating discriminatory practices. The membership application process was made transparent, with clear criteria based on financial qualifications and adherence to club rules rather than subjective cultural fit assessments. Staff underwent training on unconscious bias and inclusive customer service. Tom did try to sue for wrongful termination, but faced with the evidence we had gathered, his attorney advised him to drop the case. Last I heard, he was working at a much smaller club in a neighboring state. The most rewarding changes came in the months that followed. We renovated the clubhouse, modernizing facilities while preserving its historic character. We introduced community programs, including subsidized membership for local students with academic achievements and a summer sports program for underprivileged youth. Surprisingly, these changes attracted new members rather than driving them away. Our waiting list grew longer than it had been in years. 1 year after the incident, we hosted a charity gala for a local education foundation. The event was attended by community leaders, longtime members, and many new faces. During the evening, an elderly gentleman approached me. He introduced himself as having lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years. I never thought I'd see the day, he told me, his voice thick with emotion. My wife and I tried to join this club back in 1980. We were told there was no room for people like us. Tonight, my granddaughter swam in that pool. That moment made everything worthwhile. Sometimes justice requires patience, planning, and positioning yourself where you can make the most impact. The country club is now a true reflection of our diverse community, while still maintaining the excellence and service that made it prestigious. And whenever I swim in that pool with my family, I remember that day and feel proud of how far we've come. As for Tom, I see him occasionally around town. He always finds somewhere else to look. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Alright, so some years ago, I used to work for a major tech company. I had to move around floors a lot because I was in charge of the tech side of keeping business running smoothly for those that had to communicate with customers, clients, etc. There was this one lady that was a bit of a problem and had a habit of being involved in a lot of terminations due to supposed harassment claims. I had to deal with her a few times a week, somewhat regularly. Now, I have some trust issues and generally view a workplace as a minefield and tend to have a "my colleagues are the enemy" mentality. I'm paranoid anxious, so sue me. Because of that, I record every conversation I have and have a recording going at all times via a recorder pen I keep in my shirt pocket. It's got great quality. Story time. I was doing some work after completely replacing the computers and many of the tech on her floor, and I had to walk behind her and several other people who were at their desks working. One of the several keyboards I was carrying out of the confined space hit the back of her chair while I was walking and talking into my headset to a colleague. She turned around abruptly and glared at me, but said nothing. I finished my work for the day and went home. Next day, I get in, am met by security and taken up to the HR floor. She made a claim against me, saying I made a sequel comment and grabbed her ass. I was being terminated. After everything is said and I'm handed the paperwork, I pull out my laptop and quickly pull up the camera feed, which has no sound. They say, "Well, there is not audio to cover you," so I say, "Well, actually, I record everything I say or do while working here." I then slowly pull up the recording for that day and have them listen to all of it. The lawyer in the room had the saltiest look I've ever seen. Well, they lost their grounds to term me, and I immediately filed an HR complaint and threatened to get legal involved. She was terminated a few days later. Around a week after that, they ended up going after her for embezzlement because they do a basic full investigation into somebody terminated and found she had been stealing company money through an expenses card. It was apparently a lot because sometime afterwards she ended up doing time. Was a great experience, and it justifies viewing your co-workers as enemies and recording them. Also, never trust HR. Edit 1.5. I removed the branding from the pen years ago, but I got it on Amazon for like $40. I think it might be one of the following brands though: Almago, Home Life Digital, or Jazzwell. I honestly don't recall. It's not voice activated though. It actively records at all times while on. Ignore this edit. See Edit 4 for the pen brand. Edit 2. Apologies for the slow replies, typos, and missing chunks. There is more to the story and bits I forgot. I have a very bad memory and tend to forget things very fast. =P. I could only have my head put through the wall so many times as a kid by my old man before there's some functional issues in the old electric meat bag. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. Edit 3. Also, to the people sending me DMs or replying with accusing me of being a sexist, women hater / fascist / incel, are you okay? Do you need a hug? I don't have a problem with women, but it seems like some of y'all might be projecting. Edit 4. I am 90% confident. The pen was a Brookstone product I got at a discount from when my sister used to run a Brookstone location. I think I was wrong in the original edit about the brand. Edit 5. How would he grab her if she was sitting? The office chairs had gaps through which that is plausible. Also, my laptop wasn't a recording device. It had access to the camera system that surveyed every floor. The next one is a malicious compliances story. Policy change. My department, around 200 software engineers, instituted a policy. All code changes must be installed on all servers within 2 weeks, or have manager approval. Context. I work in software at large companies. Eventually, software that is written needs to be deployed to a computer somewhere. Software changes are one of the biggest reasons for bugs or outages. But the way many software companies work is every change increments a version number. Think I'm deploying version 111 inches to a server somewhere, and if the previous version that was deployed was version 101, that means 10 changes are going out. If one of them fails, we basically need to sift through the changes to find the bug and revert the changes. Deploying regularly is good practice and keeps the amount of code being deployed low and allows us to quickly identify failures. Problem: it was literally impossible to follow this rule as simple code changes implied. 100 deployments. If this sounds insane, it is, but only because it wasn't automated. This meant that pretty much any change required manager approval. I called this out and suggested changing the code such that we could make changes to individual systems at a time, around 3 months of work. This was not funded by management. The malicious compliance. I blocked literally every change because we're not following policy and made them ask for manager approval. This forced managers to confront the unfollowable policy and to understand the complexity of what they were asking. But they kept approving changes anyway. So I kept it up. Every change was going to follow this policy. Then management would be forced to 1. Approve the change anyway, 2. Invest in the code changes to isolate services, or 3. abandon the policy. While there was an initiative for automation, time to delivery was long and only reduced the number of manual actions to about 30. After 9 months and dozens of overrides, a new initiative that was critical required rapid changes. I made a document outlining how many times the policy had been overridden, what could be done to follow the policy, but ultimately recommended that we either invest now in the changes to allow this to work, slow down the critical project to follow policy, or abandon it. It was abandoned. The aftermath. I received an exemplary performance review, with people noting my commitment to quality and a champion of this policy. The next one is an entitled people story. I was very publicly verbally battered for sex by a mentally unwell forever alone for 5 years. As recently as a few months ago, I have begged him to stop, sent him a cease and desist, had to send a cease and desist to multiple third parties, and he's refused to stop at every turn, because he has this false sense of entitlement to harass, slander, and bully me because he's mad I rejected his offer for sex dates. It's been 5 friggin' years. This is ridiculous that he's still doing this. I had to take out a restraining order because he ignored the cease and desist and got other parties to do the same. I told them all to please stop politely for years before I used the courts. I have called the police. I have asked for a welfare check to see if they can get the stalker some crisis resources instead of him bothering me. I was more than kind, kinder than this violently hateful neckbeard deserved, particularly considering he knows I'm married and have been with my spouse for many years, and he still lied about being with me to lash out and be petty and disrespectful toward my loved ones. I told Stalker to stop, and again he refused, because he's obsessed with online red, black pill gurus who tell him lies about how women don't take their relationships seriously / respect men anymore. And Stalker eats it up. He loves having degenerate wife beaters lie to him. That's embarrassing, but more importantly, Stalker needs to keep his ideological extremism to himself. I've been put through hell by this creeper, and I'm still not cheating nor interested in cheating on my friggin' spouse. I don't know what kind of women this asshole has been hanging around, if any, but my mother's mother married early and stayed married. My parents are together and have been married for over 30 years. I was engaged and married early, and I'm staying there. So now Stalker has gotten a slap on the wrist. He's crying victim at me talking about my thoughts and feelings here online. Stalker isn't being doxxed. I'm not making violent threats against Stalker to physically harm Stalker. I'm not making sexual threats to assault Stalker, which is more decorum and kindness than Stalker displayed toward me. Stalker has a restraining order against him and doesn't have the ability nor right, as I'm not allowing it, to threaten, bully, and or force me into not being honest about what I've been put through. I'm not the one in trouble. Stalker is in trouble with the courts. So this dialogue he's attempting to have with me about not liking what I have to say isn't going to fly. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.